While everything felt like a scent, my name started showing up on internal emails next to hers. Lydia and Cass brainstorm session to PM all Cass's vision aligns with Lydia's roadmap. I thought we were building something. Together to women, rewriting what beauty meant in a post-filter world. But every empire has its secret rule. The closer you fly to its sun, the more fragile you're. Wingbecom. The first crack appeared when The Verge ran a profile on Arcana. They described Lydia as a visionary disruptor, but they mentioned the creative architect behind the brand's viral campaigns. That single paragraph was the beginning of my undoing. Lydia called me into her glass office 2 days later. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold. "You're getting a lot of attention lately," she said, stirring her ice matcha. I guess I laughed nervously. It's good for the brand, right? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, just careful not to confuse your personal story with the company's story. Arcana is one voice. I nodded, trying to ignore the burn under her words. 2 weeks later, she stopped inviting me to meetings. My team was restructured. I was reassigned to handle lower-profile projects, email, newsletters, regional collaborations. It wasn't a demotion on paper, but everyone knew what it was. Then came the shoot, the one that would change everything. Arcana had signed a controversial pop artist, Nova Reed, for a global campaign called Unmask. Lydia wanted it edgy, raw, emotional. She handed me the concept and said, "Make it real." So I did. We filmed in a decaying church downtown, graffiti bleeding across cracked walls. Nova sat on the altar, stripping off her makeup as she whispered about shame, capitalism, and beauty. It was art, dangerous, haunting art. When the final cut dropped online, it exploded. Millions of views, trending hashtags, think pieces praising its authenticity. But one night later, Lydia called me into her office again. "What the hell is this?" she asked, her voice sharp as broken glass. "It's what you asked for," I said, still buzzing from the campaign's success. "I asked for edge, not blasphemy. You've offended half our investors. Nova's team says they're getting threats. It's going viral." I protested. "Isn't that the point?" Her lips tightened. "Huh? All attention is good attention, Cass." That's when she said it, calmly, deliberately, like she'd practiced it. "You're bad for the brand." I remember going still. The words didn't even sound real at first. "Bad for the brand," I repeated. She sighed. "You take risks without understanding consequence. You blur the line between message and chaos. We can't afford that. Mi contract doit mutually use those exact words, like a spell designed to erase the messages of betrayal. My office access was revoked within an hour. My name disappeared from Arcana's website by the end of the day. For months, I tried to rebuild quietly freelance gigs, unpaid projects, even a stint writing ad copy for dog food. But the industry moves like a bloodstream, and Lydia's influence ran deep. No. One wanted to touch someone who had creative differences. I might have stayed buried if not for the journalist. Her name was Ellen Cho, and she was writing an expose on toxic branding cultures in the wellness industry. When she reached out, I almost ignored her. But then she said something that changed everything. People still talk about Unmask. They think Lydia made it. Something in me cracked open. I told her everything, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the truth behind the campaigns. I didn't sugarcoat a single thing. When her article dropped, it went nuclear. The goddess behind the mask, inside the cult of Arcana. Within days, Netflix called, then Amazon. Then a studio in LA with a reputation for messy, prestige biopics. By the end of the month, I had a $5 million deal on the table for adaptation rights. I signed it without hesitation. Now, as I sit in a rented mansion overlooking the Pacific, watching the sun dissolve into gold, I can't stop replaying that moment under the fluorescent lights. Lydia Kane, immaculate as ever, telling me I was bad for the brand. She was right. In a way, I was bad for her brand. But I built one of my own. One that sells better, bleeds louder, and doesn't pretend to heal anyone. And soon, when the lights go down in theaters across the country, everyone will finally see the truth she tried to bury projected 40 feet high. They flew me out to Los Angeles on a private jet I didn't pay for. That was the first sign that I decrossed into another world, the world Lydia had always belonged to. The kind of world where your worst heartbreak becomes someone else's entertainment budget. The studio sent a car to pick me up at Lax. My driver's name was Vic, an ex-stuntman, with hands like cracked leather. "So you're the girl who took down Arcana," he said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "I didn't take anyone down," I said quietly. "I just told the truth," he chuckled. "In this town, that's the same thing. Hollywood smelled different from New York sunscreen, asphalt, and too much ambition. They'd booked me at the Chateau Marmont because of course they did. Every scandal needs its proper backdrop. When I walked through the lobby, I caught my reflection in one of the old gold mirrors and barely recognized myself. I looked expensive. Careful makeup, linen blazer, designer boots, the studio sent for optics. For optics, what a phrase. Lydia would have loved it. The first person I met from the production was Maya Torres, the screenwriter. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with short curls dyed coral pink and a confidence that filled the whole restaurant. She greeted me with a hug I wasn't ready for. "Cass, I'm obsessed with your story," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Like, the minute I read Ellen's article, I told my agent, I need this one." "Obsession sounds dangerous," I said. "Oh, it is," she grinned. "But it's the only way to write something real." She opened her laptop and showed me the first few pages of the screenplay. My name wasn't in it, thank God, but the protagonist, Mara Lane, was a thinly veiled version of me. The opening scene was cinematic as hell, a young creative director being fired under cold fluorescent light. The CEO's shadow stretching across the conference room table like a cross. "That's a bit dramatic," I said. "Yeah," Maya admitted. "But that's what truth looks like when it finally gets permission to be loud. Over the next few weeks, I watched my life turn into fiction, one draft at a time. Lydia became Vivian Hart, a goddess in heels and cruelty. The brand became Alcana. Every humiliation, every word she'd ever weaponized against me was now a line of dialogue. But here's the thing they never tell you about selling your story. Once it is theirs, they get to decide who you are. At first, I told myself I was fine with it. I attended the production, meetings, the casting sessions, even gave notes on wardrobe. But the deeper I got into the machine, the more I realized the story they were telling wasn't mine anymore. It was Hollywood's version of my pain. They wanted drama, betrayal, redemption. I had all of those, but not in the right doses. Maya started asking questions like, "Did Lydia ever threaten you? Or was there anything, sexual in your dynamic?" I said no, again and again. She nodded, but I could see it in her eyes the story wasn't juicy enough. One night, after a table read in Burbank, I overheard two producers whispering by the snack table. "She's great PR, but she's not very cinematic." "I know, maybe we play up the trauma arc. Give the character something darker." I wanted to scream that I had been plenty dark already that I. Dee spent 2 years waking up to Lydia's voice in my head, doubting every instinct that made me who I was. But I didn't. I smiled, sipped my sparkling water, and reminded myself that this was the cost of resurrection. A week later, I met the actress playing Mara. Her name was Elena Vega, a rising star with the kind of face that made camera lenses fall in love. She walked into the room, said, "Helps. Flawless skin. Quiet confidence that LA glow money can't buy." "You already look like someone who's survived something," I said. She smiled faintly. "That's because I have. We bonded quickly, maybe too quickly. I might have stayed buried, if not for the journalist." Her name was Ellen Cho, and she was writing an expose on toxic branding cultures in the wellness industry. When she reached out, I almost ignored her. But then she said something that changed everything. People still talk about Unmask. They think Lydia made it. Something in me cracked open. I told her everything, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the campaigns. I didn't sugarcoat a single thing. When her article dropped, it went nuclear. The goddess behind the mask, inside the cult of Arcana. Within days, Netflix called, then Amazon, then a studio in LA with a reputation for messy, prestige biopics. By the end of the month, I had a $5 million deal on the table for adaptation rights. Première signée. It without hesitation. Now, as I sit in a rented mansion overlooking the Pacific, Watching the sun dissolve into gold, I can't stop replaying that moment under the fluorescent lights. Lydia Kane, immaculate as ever, telling me I was bad for the brand. She was right, in a way. I was bad for her brand. But I built one of my own. One that sells better, bleeds louder, and doesn't pretend to heal. Anyone, and soon, when the lights go down in theaters across the country, everyone will finally see the truth she tried to bury projected 40 feet high. They flew me out to Los Angeles on a private jet I didn't pay for. That was the first sign that I'd crossed into another world the world Lydia had always belonged to. The kind of world where your worst heartbreak becomes someone else's. Entertainment budget. The studio sent a car to pick me up at Lax. My driver's name was Vic, an ex-stuntman, with hands like cracked leather. "So you're the girl who took down Arcana," he said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "I didn't take anyone down," I said quietly. "I just told the truth." He chuckled. "In this town, that's the same thing. Hollywood smelled different from new. York sunscreen, asphalt, and too much ambition. They'd booked me at the Chateau Marmont because of... Course they did. Every scandal needs its proper backdrop. When I walked through the lobby, I caught my reflection in one of the old gold mirrors and barely recognized myself. I looked expensive. Careful makeup, linen blazer, designer boots the studio sent for optics. For optics, what a phrase. Lydia would have loved it. The first person I met from the production was Maya Torres, the screenerite. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with short curls dyed coral pink and a confidence that filled the whole restaurant. She greeted me with a hug I wasn't ready for. "Cass, I'm obsessed with your story," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Like, the minute I read Ellen's article, I told my agent, "I need this one. Obsession sounds dangerous," I said. "Oh, it is," she grinned. "But it's the only way to write something real." She opened her laptop and showed me the first few pages of the screenplay. My name wasn't in it, thank God, but the protagonist, Mara Lane, was a thinly veiled version of me. The opening scene was cinematic as hell, a young creative director being fired under cold fluorescent light, the CEO's shadow stretching across the conference room, table like a cross. "That's a bit dramatic," I said. "Yeah," Maya admitted. "But that's what truth looks like when it finally gets permission to be loud." Over the next few weeks, I watched my life turn into fiction, one draft at a time. Lydia became Vivian Hart, a goddess in heels and cruelty. The brand became Alcana. Every humiliation, every word she'd ever weaponized against me was now a line of dialogue. But here's the thing, they never tell you about selling your story. Once it's theirs, they get to decide who you are. At first, I told myself I was fine with it. I attended the production, meetings, the casting sessions, even gave notes on wardrobe. But the deeper I got into the machine, the more I realized the story they were telling wasn't mine anymore. It was Hollywood's version of my pain. They wanted drama, betrayal, redemption. I had all of those, but not in the right doses. Maya started asking questions like, "Did Lydia ever threaten you? Or was there anything, sexual in your dynamic?" I said no, again and again. She nodded, but I could see it in her eyes the story wasn't juicy enough. One night, after a table read in Burbank, I overheard two producers whispering, "By the snack table." "She's great PR, but she's not very cinematic." I know. Maybe we play up the trauma arc. Give the character something darker. I wanted to scream that I had been plenty dark already, that I'd spent 2 years waking up to Lydia's voice in my head, doubting every instinct that made me who I was. But I didn't. I smiled, sipped my sparkling water, and reminded myself that this was the cost of resurrection. A week later, I met the actress playing Mara. Her name was Elena Vega, a rising star with the kind of face that made camera lenses fall in love. She walked into the room, extended a hand, and said, "I hope I'd eat her floleskin quai com money kai. You already look like someone who survived something," I said. She smiled faintly. "That's because I have. We bonded quickly." Maybe too quickly. What did it feel like the moment she fired you? She asked one afternoon as we sat by the pool at the studio lot. "Like someone had ripped out the floor beneath me," I said. Like I'd been living in a story that suddenly decided it didn't need me anymore. She nodded slowly. Good. That's what I want to play. For a moment, I almost believed that maybe this whole circus had a purpose, that maybe, through Elena, people would finally see me. But then, a few days later, Lydia Kane returned to the narrative, not the fictional Vivian Hart, the real one. I woke up one morning to a headline splashed across Variety. Akana founder Lydia Kane signs deal with Amazon for new documentary on truth in beauty. It was a direct counterstrike. Her smiling face filled my phone screen. Her quote perfectly ass gossip. The truth will speak for itself. Within hours, journalists were reaching out. Cass, any comment on Lydia's upcoming project? Cass, are you worried this will affect your film? Cass, were you aware she's working with your former PR director? I ignored them all. But when I saw the teaser poster for her DOC, a minimalist shot of a woman wiping a mirror clean, I nearly threw my phone across the room. It was my image, my campaign, my art, recycled, sanitized, rebranded. That night, I called Maya. We have to move up the release, I said. Cass, the studio's got timelines. Lydia's rewriting the narrative. Again, if her version comes out first. Showings. There was silence on the line. Then Maya said softly, you really think this is still about winning? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was about not disappearing again. The next morning, I met with the producers in their glass office overlooking Sunset Boulevard. I pitched them until 20 or forgiving. I wanted Mara to burn everything down. No redemption, no reconciliation. Just the truth, ugly, furious, and final. They hesitated, but when I offered to waive part of my back end, share to make it happen, they agreed. Money talks louder than art in Hollywood. Filming resumed with new intensity. Elena was incandescent in the final mirror confrontation between Mara and Vivian. She screamed, cried, shattered a bottle of serum across the floor. Watching it live on set, I felt something shift inside me. Catharsis, maybe. Or closure, pretending to be catharsis. After the final take, Elena came over, her eyes still glistening. You good? She asked. I laughed quietly. Good doesn't begin to cover it. She tilted her head. Then what does real? I said. For the first time in a long time, it feels real. But the truth is, I didn't know then that Lydia wasn't done yet. Because 2 weeks later, on the eve of the film's premiere, she called me. Her number appeared on my screen like a ghost refusing to die, and like a fool, I answered. Her voice hadn't changed. It was still soft, deliberate, every syllable placed like glass. Hello, Cass, she said. It's been a while. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. The years between us collapsed into static. I stood by the window, staring at the city, lights scattered across the hills like jewels I'd never afford. How did you get my number? I finally asked. She chuckled. Please. You of all people should know, information is never really lost. Only repackaged. There it was, that old arrogance, polished and venomous. I could almost see her smirk through the phone. I wanted to hang up, but my hand wouldn't move. Maybe some part of me still wanted her approval. Even after everything. What do you want, Lydia? I saw the trailer, she said. Yours, or should I say, ****. The way she said it made my stomach tighten. You don't get to call it that, I said. Oh, I think I do. After all, you're telling my story. Or at least your distorted little version of it. It's my version. I snapped. The one you tried to bury. There was a pause. Softened, the way it used to before. She dismantled me piece by piece. Cass, you're talented. You always were. But you've made a terrible mistake. You've built a monument to resentment, and when the dust settles, you'll still be standing in the ruins. I laughed bitterly. You sound rehearsed. Is that from your documentary? Mine will last longer, she said simply. The truth always does. And then she hung up. The line went dead, but her words didn't. They stayed, crawling under my skin like something alive. I tossed the phone onto the bed and walked out to the balcony, trying to shake her voice out of my head. Below me, the city hummed neon, distant sirens, a million quiet ambitions devouring each other. I told myself it didn't matter. That the movie was my closure, my triumph, but her call had cracked something open. The next morning, when I arrived at the studio for a final press shoot, I noticed a strange tension in the air. Assistants whispering, phones lighting up. Maya approached me, her expression tight. Have you checked your socials? I pulled out my phone. Notifications flooded the screen. Trending hashtags, articles, leaked footage. Lydia's documentary had dropped early. Without warning, without press, just appeared overnight on Prime Video, the brand of truth, the Lydia Kane story. The first scene was a familiar one. Lydia, alone in a white studio, surrounded by bottles of Arcana serum and pale light. They said I silenced women. She began, her tone raw, vulnerable. But what they never asked was how much I sacrificed to build something. For them, in the first place, it was a masterclass in manipulation. They'd edited archival footage, repurposed old interviews even. Found old clips of me at Arcana, launch events smiling, beside her laughing, saying things like Lydia is a genius out of context. I looked complicit, grateful, naive. The internet devoured it. Maybe she's not the villain. Funny how the truth changes depending on who's producing it. If Cass really cared about truth, we'll sell it to Hollywood. Maya was furious. We'll fix this, we'll move pour. PR push drop a new trailer, controlled the narrative. But I couldn't hear her. All I could see was Lydia's calm, perfect face framed in white light, her smile faint, but sure she was doing it again, reshaping the truth until it fit her reflection. By the time I got home, my inbox was flooded. Journalists, producers, even old friends. Some wanted quotes, some wanted apologies, some just wanted to know if any of it was real. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through the noise until a private message stopped me cold. It was from Elena Vega. She reached out to me. My heart stuttered. I typed back immediately. Who, Lydia? Yes, she says she wants to talk, said she has information that might change how I play the role. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. Lydia had gone after the actress. Of course she had. She wasn't just trying to destroy me. She was trying to rewrite me from the inside out. I called Elena. Immediately, she answered on the third ring. Hey, she said cautiously. What did she say to you? She was polite and tense. She said she admired my work. Then she told me that the real Cass wasn't who the media made her out to be. That you were volatile, I repeated. She said you fabricated stories for attention. My throat tightened. And you believed her? There was a pause. I don't know what to believe, Elena said softly. You both sound so convinced. Something inside me cracked, then not anger, but something worse, fear, because she was right. We both did sound convinced. Lydia, with her mirror-perfect calm, me, with my unrelenting need to be heard. And somewhere between our stories, the truth was bleeding out, invisible. Don't talk to her again, I said finally. She doesn't want to help you. She wants to own you. Elena exhaled shakily. You sound just like her when you say things like that. The line went silent. I sat there for a long time after staring at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. For a moment I couldn't tell if I was looking at Lydia or at myself. The next few days blurred together. The studio doubled down on peer billboards went up across LA with the tagline, "The truth always has a price." Lydia's camp responded with their own ads, quoting her documentary, "Only liars call the truth expensive." The media framed it like a war. Kane versus Lane, truth versus fiction, CEO versus survivor. But to me it wasn't a war anymore. It was an autopsy on everything I'd ever believed about truth, art, and myself. Opening night arrived in a storm. Paparazzi lights exploded like fireworks outside the theater. People screamed my name somewhere in the distance. I thought I heard someone chanting Lydia's. Inside the air shimmered with tension. Maya sat beside me, holding a glass of champagne. Like a weapon. You ready? She whispered. No, I said, but play it anyway. The lights dimmed. The film began, and within the first 10 minutes, as I watched Eleanor's face flicker across the screen, my story, my words, my pain, I realized that Lydia had been right about one thing all along. The brand always wins. But that night, for the first time, I intended to fight back in a way she couldn't predict, because after the screening, when the audience rose in thunderous applause and cameras flashed like starlight, I slipped quietly out the side exit, headed not for the after party, but for the rooftop of the hotel where Lydia was staying, and I had something to tell her that would never make it into any script. It was raining that night, the kind of Los Angeles rain that felt like an afterthought, thin and bitter, more sound than substance. My heels clicked against the marble floor of the hotel lobby as I crossed it, trying to look like someone who belonged there. I didn't, but money and confidence looked the same under those lights, and I had just enough of both to fake it. The Elevator, ride to the rooftop suite felt endless. I watched my reflection in the mirrored walls, the city sliding down behind me like a backdrop. My heart was pounding, so hard it made the floor seem alive beneath me. I had no plan, just fury and exhaustion braided together into something reckless. When the elevator doors opened, I half expected a guard, a handler, anyone to stop me, but no. One did. Her door was slightly ajar, a sliver of golden light cutting through the hall. I pushed it open. Lydia was standing by the window wrapped in a white silk robe, a glass of champagne in one hand, her phone in the other. She turned when she heard the door, her expression calm, but sharp. Of course she wasn't surprised. Lydia Kane was never surprised. Cass, she said softly. You look beautiful. I take it the premiere went well. You know I'd come. I asked, my voice hoarse. She smiled faintly. You always do, you can't help it. I stepped inside, closing the door. Behind me the air smelled like orchids and ozone. You think you know me that well? Oh, I don't think, she said, setting her glass down. I know you needed to see me to prove something, that you're the one who got away, that you're free. She tilted her head. But you're not, are you? Something inside me snapped. You don't get to psychoanalyze me anymore, don't I? She said, stepping closer. You made me into a monster. For millions of people to hate you, took our story, our work, and turned it into spectacle, and you think that makes you the victim. I laughed bitterly. You destroyed me. Lydia, you used me until I wasn't useful anymore. She didn't flinch. I built you. The words hit harder than I expected. She said them without malice, just certainty. You were raw potential. She continued, I gave you shape, purpose, power, and what did you do with it? You turned it into vengeance because you took everything. I shouted my name, my work, my reputation. Her gaze softened. For a fraction of a second you took it first, Cass, you just didn't notice. For a moment, silence, only the rain tapping against the glass, the low hum of the city far below. Then she walked over to a console table, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thin folder. You want to talk about truth? She said, holding it out to me. Read this. I hesitated. She smirked. Go on. I took it. Inside were documents, emails, contracts, NDAs, all signed by me, or at least by someone using my name. Dates, signatures, revisions from campaigns I'd forgotten about, but as I scanned the pages, my pulse quickened. These weren't my words, not all of them. Some were rewritten, reframed. She watched me read. You think you created, unmask. You didn't. I did. You just didn't notice when I took it from you. You forged these, I said, though. My voice lacked conviction. Did I? She shrugged. Prove it. She turned back toward the window, her reflection staring at me over the city. That's the thing about truth, Cass. It's not about being right. It's about being believed, and people believe me. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, a sharp ache that wasn't just anger anymore. It was grief. Grief for every part of me. She'd hollowed out and claimed, you'll never stop, will you? I said quietly, stop what? Turning people into props in your story. Her eyes met mine in the glass. And you're any different? You sold our pain for $5 million that landed like a slap. For a long moment, we just stood there, two women staring at each other through layers of glass and history. The air between us hummed with something almost electric. Then, without meaning to, I said, you know they're going to make a sequel. She arched an eyebrow. To what? To this, I gestured. Between us, they'll eat it alive. The rivalry, the lawsuits, the leaked calls, you and me locked in some eternal catfight. For the cameras, it's perfect. Her mouth curved into a small, amused smile. Maybe that's what we deserve. No, I said, that's what you deserve. I'm done. I dropped the folder onto the floor, papers scattered like white feathers. Then I turned to leave. Cass, she called after me, her voice suddenly softer. What if we both were right? I froze. What if you were bad for the brand, she said, and I was bad for you? I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Downstairs, the city had gone quiet under the rain. I walked out into it. No umbrella, no entourage. Just me, washed raw, anonymous again. The air tasted like metal and freedom. When I got back to my rented place, the phone was already buzzing. Maya, Elena, studio, execs, they all wanted statements, responses, damage control. I didn't answer any of them. I poured a drink, sat on the balcony, and watched the headlines multiply in real time. Cass Monroe confronts Lydia Kane at Beverly Hills Hotel. Leaked photos show the real feud behind the movie. Bad for the brand, the true story behind the true story. They'd already turned it into a sequel somewhere out there. Lydia was probably smiling, but as I sat in the dark, I realized something she'd never understand. She could own the story, manipulate that line, the Vontrauspass of silence that followed. The silence was mine, and in that silence something unexpected began to grow. Not victory, not revenge, just release. I picked up my laptop and opened a blank Document, no studio, no contracts, no producers, just me, and the truth unbranded, unbought, and for the first time I started writing the story that didn't need to sell. Continue the contract from Magnolia. Press arrived the next morning in a sleek digital folder, professional, polite, sanitized. It was everything I'd spent years chasing. In my old life validation, wrapped in a legal PDF, and yet staring at it, I felt nothing the advance. Was generous the royalties fair, they called the mirror, between us a vital exploration of modern female ambition. I could almost hear Lydia laughing at that phrasing, how easily the publishing world turned pain into prestige. I forwarded the contract to Maya. Without comment, an hour later, she called. You're actually doing it? She asked, a little breathless. I don't know. Yet I said you have to. It's the full circle cast, the thing that breaks the cycle. I laughed softly. Or starts another one. There was a pause, the kind filled with things unsaid. You're scared it'll make you her again, she said quietly. Yes, Maya sighed. Then maybe don't write about her this time. Right beyond her that night, I went for a walk through Silver Lake. The air smelled like damp concrete and jasmine, a mix that always reminded me of Los Angeles after it pretends to rain. I passed a billboard for Arcana's new rebrand. Lydia's face was nowhere on it now. Instead, there was a model with freckles and a tagline that read, "Authenticity, the new luxury." I almost laughed out loud. Lydia had taught the industry well. Even absence could be marketed back home. I opened the contract again and stared at the signature line. My cursor hovered over it for a long time before I closed the document. I couldn't sign it, not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead, I called Elena. She answered on the second ring, her voice tired but familiar. Cass, hey, a pause. You saw the news, yeah? For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You should do it, you think." "So I do, because people like Lydia build myths, people like you." She hesitated. "You tell the truth that gets buried under them." There was warmth in her voice, something almost tender. I hadn't realized how much I miss being spoken to without an agenda. "Did you ever hear from her again?" I asked. "No," Elena said, "but sometimes when I'm on set I still feel like she's watching. Like she's behind every light, every lens, whispering about what's good for the brand." We both laughed quietly. Then Elena added, "But you know what I realize, brands fade, people don't." After the call, I couldn't sleep. I opened a blank page again, and instead of writing about Lydia or Arcana or Hollywood or the fall, I wrote about the quiet after. I wrote about what it means to wake up one morning and not be anyone's project, to build a life that doesn't need an audience, to find beauty in the mundane, the burnt toast, the empty inbox, the morning light spilling across a second-hand table. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't cinematic, but it was honest. Weeks passed. Then one day, as I was grocery shopping, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Arcana officially files for bankruptcy. CEO Lydia Kane resigns. I froze between the aisles of fresh produce, the hum of refrigerators filling the silence. I clicked the article. The brand that once ruled social media had collapsed under lawsuits, investor withdrawals, and what the press called irreparable reputational damage. At the bottom of the piece was a photo. Lydia leaving a courthouse. No makeup, no entourage, just a woman with a blank expression and a shadow for a legacy. I didn't feel joy, not revenge, just stillness. Later that night, I walked down to the beach. The air was sharp and cold, the tide crawling toward my feet. Somewhere out there beneath the waves, everything we'd built, the empire of image, the altar of perfection, felt like it was finally sinking. I whispered her name once just to see how it sounded when it wasn't sharp. Lydia. It drifted into the dark, absorbed by the ocean's pulse, and for the first time I didn't want to be heard. Months later, the mirror between US hit the shelves, not through Magnolia Press, but through a small, independent publisher run by women who'd been silenced in their own industries. No billboards, no premieres, just word of mouth, one reader at a time. It found its audience anyway. Letters started arriving, handwritten ones from women who'd lived their own versions of the story. Assistants, models, teachers, mothers. They didn't care about Hollywood or the brand wars. They cared that someone had said out loud what they'd been afraid to name, that power disguised as mentorship is still control, that belonging can be a beautiful word for captivity. One letter stood out. It came on heavy cream paper, the handwriting elegant but firm. I never learned how to tell my side, it said, but I'm glad someone finally did. LK. I read it 3 times, unsure whether it was a ghost or an apology. Maybe both. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. A year passed. The world moved on as it always does, but sometimes when I see a new beauty brand launch with its perfect lighting and its buzzwords transparency, truth, empowerment, I think of Lydia, and I think of myself, the version she built, and the one I became after I tore her reflection out of me. People still ask if we ever spoke again. I tell them the truth, once on a rooftop in the rain, and once in a letter with no return address. That's enough. The rest of the story belongs to the silence, the space between her empire's collapse and my own rebirth. And if someone were to ask me now, was it worth it, I'd say yes. Because in losing her, I found the one thing she never could sell, trademark, or spin into profit, myself, and that finally was good for the brand that mattered most, the one that was never meant to be a brand at all. The first time someone recognized me in public after the book came out, I was in line at a used bookstore in Silver Lake holding a second-hand copy of The Bell Jar. The irony wasn't lost on me. A woman in her 50s, grey hair, tied up, paint smudges on her hands, leaned forward, squinting. "You're her, aren't you?" she said softly. "Zeon." Who wrote asterisk the mirror between us asterisk. I hesitated. For a long time, that question would have sent me into performance mode, chin high, voice steady, smile practiced. But I didn't have the energy for that anymore. "Yeah," I said simply. She smiled in a way that wasn't intrusive, just real. "Thank you," she said, "for saying what no one wanted to hear. I worked for a woman like that once. She told me I was too emotional to lead. I quit the next day. Been painting ever since." She handed me her card, Marina Vale, artist. I still keep it taped to my fridge. Moments like that started to happen more often. Sometimes at cafes, sometimes at airports, sometimes in DMs from strangers. They didn't want selfies or signatures. They just wanted to say, "I've been there." It didn't make me famous. It made me human again. But there was one message I didn't expect. It arrived a year and a half later through an encrypted email address. No greeting, no signature, just a video file and a single line. "You should see this before the world does." For a moment, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the file name. Arcana_Vault footage_2019 up over my stomach. Dropped. That was the year of asterisk unmask. Asterisk I hesitated before opening it. When I finally did, the screen filled with grainy security footage from the old Arcana studio, the one on Fairfax, where it had all begun. The camera was angled toward a dimly lit set. I saw myself, younger, pacing near the camera, directing the shoot. Nova Reed sat on the altar, makeup smeared, light catching on her tear-streaked cheeks. Lydia stood off to the side, in black, arms folded, expression unreadable. There was no sound, but I could feel the tension. At one point, Lydia stepped forward, said something to Nova, then turned toward me. The footage zoomed in, probably enhanced by whoever sent it. I saw my own mouth move, my hand gesturing wildly. Lydia snapped back, sharp. We were arguing, animated, raw. And then, in one horrifying instant, Lydia shoved her. It crashed, spark fleeing, every jump back. When Nova screamed, this trend to static. I watched it twice, then 3 times, heart hammering. That footage, if real, was damning. It would have changed everything back then. Proved that asterisk unmask asterisk wasn't chaos by my design, but a fracture in hers. But why now? And who sent it? There was no metadata on the file. No traceable IP, just a ghost of the past, resurfaced like a message in a bottle. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window, the footage looping, silently, in the background. I could have sent it too. The press leaked it anonymously. Ended Lydia's ghost once and for all. But as I watched my younger self move across that screen, fierce, impulsive, desperate to be seen, I felt something shift. I didn't want vengeance anymore. I didn't want another round of public dissection. I wanted peace. So I did something I never thought I would. I forwarded the video to one person, Lydia. No message, no warning, just the file. For 3 days, I heard nothing. Then, late one night, my phone buzzed. One new message, a video call request. It was her. Première en soirée. Her face appeared in the glow of the screen, older, drawn, but still Lydia, still composed in that unnerving, camera-ready way. "You saw it," she said. "I did." A pause. Then she nodded. "It doesn't matter anymore. You're wrong," I said. "It always mattered." Her eyes softened. "Maybe once, but now no one remembers. They've moved on." The world doesn't want truth, it wants closure. Then why did you make your documentary? Her lips curved in a tired smile. Because I didn't know the difference yet. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't angry anymore, it was heavy with something else. Recognition, maybe. Or exhaustion. Ten sure say you destroyed with that. I almost did you. I thought about it for a moment before answering. Because I finally realized that you weren't the story anymore. I am, for the first time in all the years I'd known her. Lydia looked small, human. She nodded slowly, like she understood. You were always the story. Cass, I just wanted to own it. And then she ended the call. I sat there for a long time afterward, watching the rain blur the city outside my window. The video file still sat on my laptop, unopened again. I thought about deleting it, but something stopped. No revenge für juste instant. Because maybe some truths aren't meant to be erased there, meant to stay quietly waiting. Like a backup memory of who we were before the performance took over. Months later, The Mirror between US was adapted into an audiobook. They asked me to narrate it myself. I agreed, not because I wanted to relive it, but because I wanted to own my voice finally, fully, without Lydia's echo behind it. During the recording, there was a moment halfway through one line that caught in my throat. She said I was bad for the brand. But what she really meant was I couldn't be controlled. I paused, the sound engineer asking if I needed a break. I shook my head and said, no, keep rolling, and I finished it in one take, when the final checkered fuck closed me. And realized something I hadn't known how to name. Before, I didn't forgive her, I didn't hate her. I just didn't need her anymore. And in a world built on needing to be seen, that was the purest kind of freedom I could imagine. I walked out of the studio into a pale dawn, the city waking up around me. Somewhere behind the hills, I imagined Lydia doing the same, her empire gone, her reflection finally her own. We'd both been bad for the brand. But maybe that was the point, because some stories aren't meant to sell. They're meant to survive. I moved north the following spring. Not far, just far enough that no one in my new neighborhood cared. I'd once been Haide Onsfo. Zetanois. Tucked in the folds of the coast, a strip of blue-grey ocean on one side and pines on the other. The locals called it Crescent Hollow, as if the name itself had been designed to sound like rest. I rented a small house with peeling, white paint, and a porch that sagged slightly in the middle. The real estate agent apologized for the flaws. I told her I liked them. Perfection had taken. The first weeks they were quiet, almost eerily so. No launch events, no press calls, no inbox pinging, like a metronome of anxiety. I'd wake early, walk down to the shore with a thermos of coffee, and watch the tide pull and release. There was something almost maternal about the rhythm of it, constant, forgiving. For months, I didn't write a word. It wasn't that I couldn't, I just didn't need to. I didn't sing Clemietti touch Baldwin, did you and Tony Mori? I underlined passages not because I wanted to use them, but because they made me feel human again. Sometimes, when the wind came in from the ocean, I'd think about Lydia, not with rage, not even with nostalgia. Just with curiosity, like studying a scar you no longer resent, but still trace out of habit. One afternoon, I got a letter. Not an email, not a package, an actual letter. It was postmarked from Maine, written in careful blue ink. Cass, I saw the audiobook credits. You sound whole. I wanted to tell you that I'm teaching again. Not business. Photography, the kind that uses. Real film, the kind that forces you to slow down. I'm not looking for forgiveness. I just thought you should know. I read it twice. Then I folded it, slid it into a drawer, and let it live there, no reply. No closure. Some stories didn't need an ending. They just needed to stop echoing. The world, of course, kept spinning. The Mirror between us found its way into university courses, feminist think pieces, and podcasts dissecting modern mythology. Every now and then, a journalist would reach out, asking if I'd comment on the legacy of Arcana. I never did. Instead, I started hosting a small workshop at the local library. It wasn't glamorous 5 or 6 women, a few retired teachers, one high school student who wanted to be a screenwriter. We'd sit in a circle every Wednesday evening, coffee in paper cups, talking about the stories we'd never been allowed to tell. One night, during a session on narrative voice, the teenager Millie asked, "How do you know when your story's over?" I thought about that for a long time. Then I said, "When you stop trying to prove you survived it." The group fell silent. Then, one of the women, an older nurse with a gentle, steady face, nodded. "That's the truth," she said softly. After the session, Miller lingered as the others left. "You ever miss it?" she asked. "The fame, the noise." I smiled. Sometimes. But only the parts that felt like flight before the fall. She looked puzzled. "So you do it differently?" "No," I said. "I just know when to stop flying." She smiled then, that fearless teenage smile that believes the sky has no edges. "I hope I figure that out too." "You will," I said, "if you remember that your story is yours, even when someone else tries to narrate it." After she left, I stayed in the empty library for a while, the smell of paper and dust thick in the air. I thought of all the women in rooms like this across the world writing, erasing, rewriting the quiet architects of their own resurrection. Later that night, back at the house, I found myself pulling out an old box of photographs. Most of them were from my Arcana Days campaign, shoots, award shows, flights, rooms with too much white light, faces I barely remembered smiled up at me, frozen, mid-performance. And then, at the bottom of the box, a Polaroid, me and Lydia, before everything burned. We were standing on the studio rooftop, laughing, wind in our hair. The world hadn't yet divided us into archetypes. We were just two women who thought we were inventing beauty. I turned the photo over. On the back, in Lydia's handwriting, it said, "To the girl who makes the truth look good." I stared at it for a long time before sliding it back into the box. That night, premier, dreamed of the old Arcana studio, not the chaos, not the fire, but the beginning. The smell of rose serum, the hum of fluorescent lights, the echo of ambition, still untouched by betrayal. When I woke, the ocean was loud outside, the morning fog curling around the porch like smoke. Première ma de coffee and started to write again, not about Lydia, not about brands or betrayal, but about the women in my workshop. Their stories were smaller, but truer. A retired nurse writing about her first patient. A teacher remembering a lost friend. Miller inventing worlds where girls fought back with words instead of weapons. For the first time, I was writing for something that didn't demand anything back. One evening, while printing pages, my laptop pinged a small notification from a news site I hadn't checked in months. Former CEO Lydia came to exhibit photography collection. Unfiltered, there was a photo attached. Lydia stood in a dimly lit gallery, surrounded by black and white portraits of ordinary women, wrinkled hands, crooked smiles, eyes full of untold things. The caption beneath quoted her, "I used to brand beauty. Now I just try to see it." I stared at it for a while, not with anger, but something like quiet acceptance. Maybe this was what transformation looked like, not redemption, not punishment, but the slow surrender of control. I closed the tab, stepped outside, and watched the tide roll in. The ocean didn't care who we'd been. It erased every footprint by morning. And, for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to leave a mark. I just let the water reach my toes, the waves folding in and out like breath, and whispered to no one in particular. The story's over, and this time, it was... The morning I realized it was truly over, the sky was the color of pale porcelain, quiet, almost hesitant. I had just finished teaching my last workshop of the season. A circle of women who'd taught me far more about resilience than I could have ever offered them. They hugged me goodbye, leaving behind coffee cups and laughter, and when the door finally clicked shut, the silence felt different, not hollow this time, complete. I walked down to the beach, notebook in hand. The wind was cool, smelling faintly of salt and pine. The horizon looked endless, the ocean steady in its indifference. For years, I had measured time in campaigns, scandals, premieres, and apologies. Now, I measured it in tides. I opened my notebook, a blank page waiting. No contracts, no brand slogans, no editors hovering behind invisible screens. Just me. I wrote a single sentence. Every empire begins with a mirror and ends with a reflection, you know. Longer, recognize. And then I stopped. Because there was nothing more to say. The wind lifted the page, as if to remind me that words don't belong to us once we let them go. I tore it out and folded it, slipping it into the pocket of my coat. Maybe someday someone would find it, or maybe it would dissolve into the sea. Either was fine. My phone buzzed once, an unread message from an unknown number. For a moment, I almost ignored it. But then curiosity won. I saw your student stories online. You did good work, Cass. Maybe we both finally learned how to build something real. No flourish, no manipulation, just words, stripped bare. I smiled, not out of sentiment, but understanding. Maybe this was the only apology either of us knew how to make. I typed back one line. We did, Lydia, in our own ways. Then I turned the phone off and slipped it into my bag, the tide whispering against the shore like applause too soft to hear. The sun began to sink, streaking the water with gold. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed. Being chosen was the same as being seen. I thought about the woman, Lydia, had been the one who mistook control for power. And I thought the bud become survivor own illy. I stayed there until the last light disappeared, the world folding into blue. And when I finally rose to leave, the water had reached my feet, warm and patient. I whispered into the wind, not as a confession, not as an ending, but as a truth finally freed from performance. I forgive us. Then I turned away from the sea, toward the quiet life waiting beyond the dunes. No spotlight, no scripts, no brands to protect. Just the sound of my own footsteps fading into the evening. On the Andouitat Story Islands. Please paste your script here. I have understood your commands. They laughed, I said, staring at the massive glass tower gleaming under the morning sun. They actually laughed. The building rose higher than anything else on the block, 40 floors of mirrored arrogance. And right at the top, etched in gold across the facade, was the name of the company that had once been called stupid, impossible, delusional. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very people who mocked my decision to invest in that hopeless startup now worked for it. Some even begged for jobs there. Every time I saw the logo, I could still hear their laughter. It wasn't the kind that stung once and faded. No, this was the kind that carved itself into memory, mocking me for years until I finally made peace with the sound by drowning it in success. It all stin accomped. Café with bad Wi-Fi and worse coffee. I was 26, broke, and exhausted from pitching startup ideas that went nowhere. I had spent 2 years bouncing between freelancing gigs, odd jobs, and rejections from investors who thought my ideas were too early or too unrealistic. The world was already tired of startups that promised revolutions and delivered nothing but debt. But that day, I met someone who changed everything, not just for me, but for an entire industry. Her name was Emma Vale. She was sitting alone by the window, surrounded by a small army of devices, 3 laptops, a tablet, and a phone, all open, all alive. I remember noticing the faint tremor in her hands, the kind that came from caffeine overload or pure passion. She caught me staring, smiled like she'd been expecting me all along, and said, "You're Alex, right? The guy who wrote that essay about digital empathy that caught me off guard." Nobody read that essay. It was buried somewhere deep in the internet. Written during a lonely night, when I questioned why machines could predict our purchases but not our feelings. "You actually read that?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "Read it." She grinned, tapping a line on her screen. "I bookmarked it. You wrote that algorithms should care. That they should understand why people do what they do, not just what they do." That's what I'm building. That was the first time I heard the name of her company. Lumen. She described it like a religion. "Lumen," she said, "will make machines understand context, emotion, the unspoken things. It won't just analyze data, it'll feel it. It'll adapt to the human condition, in real time." I laughed, not because I didn't believe her, but because the idea sounded like science fiction. Every AI company at the time was chasing speed, scale, or profit. Nobody was chasing empathy. But the way she spoke, fast, sharp eyes, gleaming like she could already see the future. It was contagious. "How far along are you?" I asked. She hesitated. Technically, I said, "I have an idea to developers who might quit."